Hello, everyone. Welcome to July 8th, 2025 SIG Node meeting. Today, we currently have one agenda, which was brought up by Adrian, who doesn't seem to be here, but I think I can represent him. There has been a proposal to create a checkpoint restore working group to work towards better integrating the checkpoint restore behavior that we have in the kubelet with other SIGs and working groups. I know that there's some interest from folks who are working on AI about potentially using checkpoints to checkpoint AI workloads, as well as potentially I have heard rumor of there being interest in projects like Q about using it checkpointing for preemption instead of stopping workloads. So seems like a decent time for this. There's support in FryU, the checkpoint restore and user space tool for GPUs. So that's a big piece that had been missing and is now present. So I think that there's currently a proposal, but it needs some sponsoring, and I think SIG Node could be a decent place to have that happen. So we would have to, yeah. So what do people think about that?
I think it's an interesting topic. We long discussed checkpoint to introduce it in containerd, and I think the problem was all the APIs that need to be exposed and like all the use cases to make it secure.
Yeah, and I think having a working group to put together set APIs and make sure that there are ways to keep it secure, or at least create access controls so that only certain people who are trusted can do it. I think would probably be the first outcome of the working group is having. Oh, here's Adrian.
Sorry, I
API. Sorry, go ahead.
I joined a couple of minutes too late. Yeah, so so there has been a small group of people discussing checkpoint restore for a while, and it felt like we got inputs from different sides. So it felt like we should have a more formal way to have the discussion in a more open way, have a more open way to see the results and not just in private chat and email. So I think this was the main motivation to talk about the working group and propose the idea of a checkpoint restore working group.
Yeah, I guess another topic was checkpoint is per container today, and I wonder if we can cover per pod checkpointing. Because gvisor is like bigger sandbox, so maybe for gvisor it may be easier to checkpoint the whole pod, like how to coordinate it. That will be, yeah. I think many APIs, like one API what we discussed, like how to alkaline secure it, but like other than that, like how to take in checkpoint from like what layer of checkpointing to take and how application can tell kubelet that it's ready to be checkpointed. All those interesting APIs may be discussed in this working group. I don't know if it's in scope of charter yet, but that may be a good addition there.
Yeah. So all those ideas are definitely something I would like to see discussed and designed in a larger group. We know that pod checkpointing works. We implemented it a couple of years ago as a proof of concept. So, but getting the API right is always the hard part, I guess. So at this point, it felt like we just got too many requests from too many different sites and at too many different places. There were ideas, and so I think one of the main points is have a central place to have the discussions and come up with something from input from different sides and not just from a couple of people.
Yeah, I think that this makes sense. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, and I just wanted to bring it to SIG Node because most of the discussion have so far happened at SIG Node, and I think it would make sense to start here, if for the sponsorship ask here, and because that has been our main point of discussions so far here, and just making everybody aware that we have the idea, that we wrote the email, that there's the pull request opened, and I try to follow the recommendations from the community GitHub, what to do, and so I just wanted to bring it up here because that was also one of the points there, if I understood it correctly.
Was this also discussed at SIG storage? I'm wondering, when you say checkpointing, how do you plan to integrate this with storage? Is it native in Kubernetes, or do you see this outside? I mean, at the node or outside as a layer above the node? Does it have the assumption that like the checkpoint lives in the node?
So what do you mean with storage? Can you be a bit more specific? Because I found out the checkpoint restore in the storage case means something completely different than when we talk about checkpoint restore of containers and processes.
Right. So my question here would be that, like, you discussed fault tolerance at the group. Now, the proposal, no, does it mean that fault tolerance at the node failure level? Does this checkpoints are stored locally at the node as a PV, or do you see this to be exported, or do you also plan to integrate this to avoid a mechanism for node failure cases as well? Or is it specifically to GPU, like workload failures and recovering?
No, yeah.
workloads from-
So the GPU case is just one of many, and it's just currently one of the most discussed or talked about use cases. But I think the idea of checkpoint restore is that the functionality should be independent of the use case, because there are a lot of different use cases, and so in the end we want to support all of them, and fault tolerance is definitely one of the use case, but it's not like we want to focus on one use case specifically.
Got it.
And currently the checkpoint is stored locally, and how to correctly or how, I think this is all part of the discussions which should happen in this working group. What should we do with the checkpoint archive, with the checkpoint information, how to best handle it? Yeah, it's all open for discussion, I would say.
Yeah, I think a lot of the location of where the checkpoints go will actually ultimately be decided by how we decide to do restore in a more legitimate way. Like right now, it's sort of interpreted like you can restore a container by like saving the checkpoint archive in an image and specifically labeling that image, and then creating a pod. And at least Cryo has like sort of rudimentary support for restoring a checkpoint archive from that, but I don't know if that's eventually what we're going to be doing. I think probably eventually we'll want to put the checkpoint archive somewhere and then have a proper API to actually restore that kind of more declaratively. So yeah, but definitely this is an open question, something that we have to work through.
Yeah, one of the things
so
we figured out currently is that it's very inefficient, especially if we're looking at GPU checkpointing. The checkpoints are huge, and then we have to convert them to the OCI image, and this takes minutes. So this is also something we want to improve in this working group. Have a better way to store it locally, or distribute it, or I don't know.
Yeah, I think the question for this forum is then, like, does anyone object to having SIG Node sponsor this working group? Like, I think like we can work through the minutia of what the working groups outcomes will be if we need to, but in a general sense, like, do we think that this is the right place for it to live? And are there any blockers on the creation of the working group to be able to work through these things?
I wouldn't say it's more of a blocker, but I would definitely recommend working with the SIG-off team. I think because of the data orientation of some of the information, we're going to probably want some identity, some authentication, authorization capabilities to make sure that we can load at the target system, right? SPIFFE Spire integration, for example, might be a good way to do it. There's lots of options, but we could definitely use the help, I think, from SIG-off.
Yeah, I think the RBAC controls for who is allowed to checkpoint and who is allowed to restore those checkpoints is going to be a really important topic of this. Well, I'm not hearing any concrete objections, so maybe we take conversation to the Kubernetes community pull request and discuss more there. But it seems like this is aligned with SIG Node's objectives, and I think to put some energy towards. Cool. Thank you, Adrian. I see. Tahir, I think you had an item in the backlog. Did you want to address that? I see that you're here.
Yeah, I guess if there's nothing else, it's not really. It's just kind of an open-ended question. I am working right now on a feature in Kubelet, trying to land it in 134, called pod certificate projected volumes. That's kind of incidental. What I'm asking about is, I noticed that the Kubelet API server source for pods, like Kubelet has many sources for pods, mirror pods, file-based pods, HTTP-based pods, but the main one would be the pulling them from the API server. That uses a list watcher rather than an informer. I'm not totally sure if that's a deliberate choice or it just predates informers. As far as I know, an informer is a very thin wrapper over a list watcher. So I just wanted to see if anyone had any context on that, or if there would be any objections to changing it to an informer, not for 134, but maybe as a cleanup landing in 135.
Yeah, I would soonest guess that this just predates informers. Like, looking at the line of code that you linked, the last change to it was 4 years ago, and that was like a package location change more than anything else. So it just, I'm going to guess, yeah, I think it could make sense as a proposal to update that.
Okay.
To be a little
Would
bit
that
more
be
modern.
Need a KEP or just send a PR in the 135 cycle and tag it for discussion in SIG Node?
I think you can just send a PR for this.
Yeah, I think you can do it in 134.
Yeah. What are the advantages of switching to an informer here?
The component I'm writing would be much more nicely structured if it could just list. It doesn't care about anything except API service source pods. So it'd be really nice if I could write an informer and use the standard informer logic for handling pod items that are coming down the queue. I could hack it on top of a list watcher, but I'd rather not.
So one of the differences is informers keep a local cache, right? And the kubelet uses pod manager as the kind of cache and source of truth for pods. I'm not sure what the implications of using pods from the Informer cache instead of Pod Manager would be, if those could ever get out of sync. I don't think Kubelet ever updates Pod Manager locally. You do want to make sure that you're not reading pod status from there, but I can't think of any other issues. But I think we could have some of these conversations on the PR.
Okay. I'll put it on my backlog to send. I think I'm not going to try to do anything for 134. I already have a solution. Code's already working for the pod certificate stuff, so I'd rather focus on getting that landed and then later come back and maybe address my wish list of cleanup things.
Sounds good.
All right.
Great, thank you. I don't see any other items or yeah, so I don't think that there's any other items to address. Does anyone have any other thing else they wanted to mention? Great, and I think we can adjourn early. Thank you everyone for joining. Hope to see you next week.